Welcome to the Seminole Wrap, a podcast about all things Florida State. I'm your host, Juan Montalvo, and joining me tonight is Tomahawk Nation managing editor Perry Kostadakis, as well as Tomahawk Nation's Austin Cox. Austin, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Appreciate y'all having me. Fired up after the week we had in basketball and, fired up to talk about the transfers as well.
Perry, are you fired up?
I am, and especially because you went in alphabetical order. So I'm very happy Austin got his time in the sun.
Well, here's another thing. Perry, you need to tell us a little bit about our future sponsor, DraftKings, and this thing where you've made, I think you said somewhere on the order of $4 to $6 million in the last 2 weekends.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to give the specific details until they sponsor us and until people give me the clout for being a DraftKings king.
You're a kingpin, is what we'll call you. Yeah.
All right,
you're like the Bill Murray character that had the really bad bald hair.
Or the draft jester. I finally got a haircut, except this time I got a haircut. Thank you.
Yeah, so you actually look like a respectable human being instead of looking homeless this time, which is really nice. I mean, when you're paired with, let's say, someone with the hair abilities of someone like Trey Rowland on a podcast, you got to bring your A game. And you were bringing your straight up F homeless game for a while there.
I went trick play on 4th and 1 to just try to upstage him, and it did not work.
And it wasn't even a cool Jameis Winston throwing a touchdown trick play.
It was that Colts 4th down play
against the Patriots.
Yeah, in overtime. That was what my hair looked like.
It was like Chad Henne trying to run for a first down.
Yeah, except Chad Henne is the GOAT, according to today. So,
well, you Henne believe it.
Yeah, there we go. That's a perfect transition.
All right, so tonight on Seminole Wrap, we're going to be talking about Florida State's win over North Carolina on the basketball court. We're going to be talking about some of the interviews that Austin was able to do after that game, as well as with the coaches and the new players, McKenzie Milton, as well as Jermaine Johnson, who are both on campus and ready to start playing some football. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on in the Florida State world. Obviously, we referenced Jameis Winston's beautiful little trick play touchdown. Cam Akers is crushing it as well for the Rams. And that and more on tonight's Seminole Wrap. So, Perry, play the music. All right, so jumping right into it, Florida State's coming off a nice win on the basketball court against UNC. Some of these are coming almost expected in recent years. Obviously, this isn't one of Roy Williams' best UNC teams. It doesn't look like a team that's going to make the Final Four or anything like that. But nevertheless, it's always good to get a win against UNC, especially when you're missing a guy like Scotty Barnes. Tomahawk Nation's Matt Minnick was there, and for a more in-depth, detailed analysis going down into the breakdown of scheme and all that sort of stuff, catch the Tomahawk Nation podcast on basketball with him and Michael Rogner. Austin, you were able to watch the game and participate in the interviews after it. What were your thoughts on the game?
Really, the offense. They showed that the NC State game Wednesday wasn't a fluke. The way they played and the way they shot. I mean, I think they were 8 of 16 from 3. And, and it's like you said, anytime you beat Carolina, that's still a great thing for Florida State basketball because of the cachet around the country. People see that, and that still really matters, especially when you couple it with getting a 30-plus point win on Wednesday against NC State.
And then we saw the struggles kind of rear their head a little bit against North Carolina. It wasn't the record-setting efficiency we saw against NC State exactly. What do you think are the kind of issues plaguing FSU basketball right now?
If you look at a guy like Malik Osborne, I thought he was kind of getting still just working his way into his role, like we've heard Coach Hamilton say a lot in the press conferences for the whole team, working into their new roles. And he kind of got comfortable in that game and was really active defensively. And I thought that was the best game he played this season. And that's kind of been the case for a lot of the guys that as the season has gone on more, they've kind of worked their way into their roles. Because everyone can't just be an MJ Walker and come out of, be a top player and easily slide into those roles and just, okay, I'm the guy now. A guy like Nathaniel Jackson, I mean, he can't just say, oh, I'm just going to always be efficient or I'm just never going to turn it over. It's hard to just flip the switch and immediately regain that role. But I think the way that they've progressed towards the end of the year, we're going to get a team that's a lot like we had last year.
And then you actually just put out an article on the site looking at where FSU is as far as the ACC, putting that into context, do you mind breaking that down in a little tasty summary that is enough to get people excited but not give away the beauty of it?
So yeah, the biggest takeaway was just how much of a better position they are in. And then the other thing about the spot they're currently in, they're sitting at as an 8 seed right now in a lot of tournament projections, particularly in the ESPN projections. But they're facing Clemson and Louisville this week, who are the top two teams in the ACC according to bracketology right now. They're both at the 4 seed line, so they have a great opportunity. If they even go 1-1 this week, they can kind of really jump into where they're just sitting at the top of the ACC.
But so one thing, it looks like obviously they're going to do a little bit better in the ACC, but it looks like they're on the verge of cracking into the top 25 for the season. I know that you were looking at that. When do you think that that's going to actually happen? When are Ham's guys going to start getting a little recognition for this season?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It was kind of strange the way they dropped out of the rankings a few weeks ago when they, of course, didn't play. They were sitting at 25. Or actually, I think they were sitting around 23. Then they dropped 25. Then they dropped completely out of the rankings. But really, you might not see Florida State jump into the top 25 this week, but it's not going to be through any fault of their own, because they literally, I think, of the 7 teams that were ahead of them, 5 of the 7 didn't lose this week, and the other 2 didn't play. I mean, Alabama had a huge win over Kentucky, and I think they went 2-0 this week. They're sitting at 24th in the poll, I believe, right now. They got St. Louis and Connecticut didn't play. Florida State, they're going to be sitting at about the 26th or 27th receiving votes as it stands, probably as it looks like tomorrow. But the only reason they didn't jump in is because no one in front of them lost.
Yeah, sometimes it's just how it goes. You're not gonna move up the rankings when no one in front of you loses. I mean, we see that in football all the time. Unless the SEC is in play. So anyway, moving on from that, you had a chance to do some interviews with some of the players and coaches after the game?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it was, you could faintly hear the locker room from the Zoom. It sounded like a little bit of a celebratory. And I certainly would have been celebrating if I was on the team after those 2 games. But yeah, I mean, we heard from Coach Hamilton, MJ Walker, and also Koprivica after the game, and all 3 of them, they were satisfied with the win, but you don't get the sense, it's not like they did anything earth shattering. I mean, it's kind of just status quo for them. Let's move on to the next game at this point. Regular season, they really don't. You might have seen 5 or 10 years ago it affect the team moving forward. Get a little too excited about it, but you don't see that with Florida State basketball nowadays. They just kind of move on to the next one, and they're definitely ready to take on Louisville and Clemson.
Yeah, they've had a lot more success in recent years than some of my time in college. That's for sure. Speaking of moving on a little bit, why don't we move on to a little bit of football? Sticking with the interview focus, you had a chance to interview some of the new members of Florida State's football team. Tell us a little bit about that. McKenzie Milton obviously is the big headliner. So let's start with Jermaine Johnson. Let's go right in with him.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, with Jermaine Johnson, a lot of people were talking about McKenzie Milton. He really, it was impressive how he came off, how mature he came off. I thought Jermaine Johnson came off very mature and professional as well. He talked a lot about. I mean, yeah, he got asked a few questions about himself, and he was talking about it's about the team. It's about doing everything he wants. He wants to do everything he can to help them win. It sounds like he's really gonna help bring that winning culture. And that's kind of sounds like a cliche, bring a winning culture in. But if you sign, look at some of a lot of the transfers Florida State has brought in the past month or so. Nearly every one of those teams had a better record than Florida State last year. And it's particularly, of course, Georgia has had a lot better record than Florida State the past 3 or 4 years. So it might not be it's not like you're getting a guy from Alabama or anything from a winning culture perspective. But the more guys you get that just haven't suffered through losing seasons year after year and have their confidence shaken a little bit, might be playing from more of a confident standpoint than maybe some of the guys we have on the team right now. But in terms of, go ahead, Perry.
Well, that's interesting that you brought up culture, because I believe it was actually Jermaine Johnson who said the culture in the locker room is flipping. And it was something the fans latched on both sides. Like, it was either like, oh, look, like it's already so evident. Like, look at what Mike Norvell is doing to this locker room. And then everyone else was like, he's been there for 2 weeks. Like, what? So where do you think that he plausibly could get the idea of the culture that is within that locker room?
Well, it's kind of weird. It's a weird spot that Florida State's in right now, because you look at certain aspects of the team, and the first thing Jermaine Johnson said was, "Hey, these guys are here to work. These guys, for the Florida State guys he's been around, he was praising what he's seen from the team around him so far. So, you know how much you can take from that, but it's definitely better than the alternative."
Yeah, there's definitely there's been widely discussed on this podcast and all over the place about some of the culture issues Florida State has had. And, Georgia may not be the place we want to borrow a winning culture from, but they definitely have their stuff a little bit more together than Florida State has the last couple of years. I think the most important takeaway from what Jermaine Johnson was saying was like you quoted him. I mean, these guys are there to work. I mean, that's the most important thing that you can get is buy-in in the locker room. I mean, if you have kids showing up to Josh Storm's off-season workouts, whether that's, lifting or practice type drills, not actually practice, but, they go and do drills that are very football specific, to help them be physically prepared for it. But as long as guys are showing up to voluntary workouts and doing stuff on top of that on their own and doing it with intensity instead of just showing up and going through the motions, that's what puts together a good football team. You don't build a football team in September. You build it in, January through August. And hopefully his words are echoed in reality and onto the football field in the fall. And did McKenzie Milton have anything to say about the culture as well, or?
Well, real quick before we hop into McKenzie Milton, the other thing I'll add about Jermaine Johnson is, sometimes it's not everything you just said is true about the culture, but part of it is, Janarius Robinson and Joshua Kendo, I thought both of those guys were locked in last year and culture-wise, I mean, I thought they were ready to play, but we just could not, or Florida State could just not get to the passer very well last year. And the first thing Jermaine Johnson said when they asked him about his game is, I'm a pass rusher. I want to be on the edge. He had 5 sacks last year for Georgia. So that has been an area of need for Florida State for several years now. So, it is a lot of his culture too, but it's going to be on the field as well.
Yeah, he's a huge fit as far as what Florida State needs. I mean, having a pass rusher has held back Florida State for several years. I mean, so Jermaine Johnson obviously talked about the culture and the winning culture that he had, been a part of at Georgia. And, there is no better culture out there than a national championship culture, which McKenzie Milton brings to the table. Did you get a chance to talk about that at all?
Oh, yeah. Well, he certainly did. And, it's like he said, you talk about winning culture. I mean, the guy, how many straight games did he win as a starting quarterback? So he definitely knows how to win. He was very impressive as well. He talked a lot about his kind of him and Norvell, they didn't really have a distinct relationship or anything per se, but it seemed like they kind of admired each other from afar, facing off against each other the few years that they did. And he mentioned that when he got hurt, it was the week before they were going to play Memphis, and Norvell sent him a football, signed from the entire Memphis team. And that's just something little that if he's entering the portal and he's looking at Florida State or another opportunity possibly, that might have factored in just the fact that not only does he respect him on the football field as an opponent, but, figures he values relationships a little bit more than some head coaches might. That's not something that you would see from an opposing coach very much.
I can't think of any Lane Kiffin would be like, hope you get better slowly, or something it would be something so mean. I can't think of a nice head coach.
Yeah, it's like the guy probably Milton had 500 yards and 4 touchdowns on him.
Yeah, so he had all the reason.
Yeah, he probably.
Yeah, I mean, you could get like Nick Saban's well wishes message, and it would just be, "I wish you the best in your future endeavors," and it's like just signed by like a robot hand.
Nicholas, it would say Nicholas, like something like that. Like I know that Norvell could be mean. I've been on the receiving end of that in the press conferences, but I think when people talk about his recruiting potential, like I do agree. Yeah, maybe he is like a little dorky or like cheesy sometimes, but like somebody who can get along or like kick it, whatever. Norvell is just like, he's not your Millhouse, but he cares. He has an engagement. He has this desire to actually build and engage relationships. And I think it legitimately comes from like his background and his childhood and the fact that when he was at Central Arkansas, he was a walk-on who got welcomed and taken into that group. And I mean, every time you see it on the press conferences, when he gets passionate, it's whenever he gets the chance to talk about, I love building like the young man's future, like whatever we can do for him, blah, blah, blah. Like he actually like, it sounds like a whole bunch of coach speak and 80% of it is, but he sounds like he actually means it.
Yeah, it's always seemed genuine to me. And I mean, I think that that's one thing that he's done a really good job of conveying to the kids on the team, at least. And, you know, the comments we're hearing from guys like Milton and Johnson and some of the other kids, it sure seems like, you know, as he's getting more of his guys in, you know, we're getting to see more and more of that. And going back to what Jermaine Johnson said, isn't that, you know, they're starting to see a culture, you know, maybe not a winning culture just yet, but a better culture. Yeah, maybe it's the fact that, you know, that we're now at a point where we've seen 40 plus players, I think at this point, depart from the time that Mike Norvell was hired, whether it's through graduation or transfers or medical disqualifications or anything like that, that he's brought in, you know, 2 full classes with a lot of transfers in them. I mean, I think at this point we're at 15 or 16. I don't remember the math off the top of my head, but I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of guys who are Norvell guys. And usually these transfers, when they come in, you know, they're bought in not necessarily to the school because it's a 1-year commitment, but more, okay, these guys are going to be who help me to, you know, prepare for the NFL or prepare to potentially be a coach later on. And that's another thing that Austin, I think McKenzie Milton talked a little bit about that, is the potential to work as a coach in the future. What were his thoughts on working, you know, as a coach in the future with Mike Norvell?
Well, yeah, well, he said he plainly stated he wants to be a coach in the future. So I mean that, and he you know, just from our first impression, we only had one media session to talk with him, but he definitely has that type of personality and that type of understanding of the game from, you know, just you can see from his playing days at UCF. But you know, that kind of factors into the fact that he wants to be a head coach or wants to be a coach in the future could really help. A lot of people are speculating as the effect that he might have on Chubba Purdy and Jordan Travis and Tate Rodemaker in the future, because, you know, Florida State doesn't only have Milton for 1 year. So the possibility that Milton could possibly come in, propel Florida State to a 7 or 8 win season. But really the biggest thing he might do would be to get a Jordan Travis or a Chubba Purdy ready to take the reins for the next 2 or 3 years. Then you kind of really have something going at quarterback if you can get Milton to kind of rub off on those guys, the success that he's had.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, and that's a point we made, you know, before he even really, you know, started exploring the transfer portal and getting into the Florida State program. You know, we talked about the potential of Milton, and one of the great parts of that, like you mentioned, was in the quarterback room. I mean, he is the elder statesman. He's a 5th-year player. He's got a ton of experience, a lot of winning experience. I mean, obviously they went undefeated his final year as a starter, you know, before the injury. And then, you know, he was on the quote unquote national championship team. But he definitely sounds, you know, he sounds and talks like an elder statesman that could be a coach when he comes out. And I think that, like you said, that could be the huge benefit, is him sort of spurring on Jordan Travis and Tate Rodemaker and Chubba Purdy for the next few years. There's some obvious serious potential between those 3 there. So it's good to have someone as an elder statesman to sort of bridge the gap a little bit, get them a little more time, because you're not going to necessarily be able to run the sort of triple option offense that we did with Jordan on a regular basis, season to season.
And the last thing I'll add to that is just when you have a player come into a program like that with the success that Milton has had, he kind of carries an instant cachet. Like if you're Jordan Travis or if you're Chubba Purdy, and it's almost like Milton doesn't need to prove himself to you. You're going to listen to what he has to say with how successful he's been. And Jermaine Johnson, when they asked him about Milton in his press conference, he talked about him for several minutes. I looked like he had a lot of respect for him, talked about him coming back from his injury. And I think he said something to the effect of, if you can get a guy like that on your team, it's always good no matter what in any situation. So it sounds like, Milton, obviously, anyone of Milton's stature is going to have a kind of instant cachet with players out. That's going to echo throughout the whole team. They're going to respect him and respect his opinion and want to play well for him.
I mean, we've seen that quarterback room. I mean, it could have been lies, but respond pretty well to having an elder statesman in that room, whether that was James Blackman. Like, that room had genuine, I believe, respect for James Blackman, Jordan Travis, because he went out of his way to help mentor like Chubba Purdy and Tate Rodman. Like, they all had a pretty close-knit, even though they all technically battled the whole season. They all were fighting for that starting spot the whole year. So for them to get that kind of maturity from Milton, who was gracious enough to not even be a jerk at UCF with his friend, Dylan Gabriel, who I believe are actually close friends. I'm not saying just friend because we're teammates. He knows how to handle himself. And even say if Jordan Travis was the primary guy, running it every play, and Milton was the guy who threw the ball, and Norvell for some reason wanted to run it wholly, he would accept that role, I believe.
Yeah, and going back to that part, I think that's another thing that sort of shows you what a good influence he is. I mean, there was nothing but positive messages from UCF players and coaches when he left, and it was sort of a tough situation. He was overtaken by Dylan Gabriel, and Dylan Gabriel is an excellent quarterback. He threw for over 600 yards in a game this year. I think I've thrown that stat on every podcast we talk about McKenzie Milton, because everyone's like, "Oh, maybe he's not healthy," and it's like, guys, don't forget, Dylan Gabriel's really good too.
Had a fantastic year.
Yeah, I mean, he's a stud. I mean, for their level in that conference, he's crushing it. I mean, so it's not like he was maybe not 100% healthy and fully ready, but from the folks we've talked to, it seems as though he's going to be coming in. And he even said he's 90%, but he'll be pretty close to 100%. And we'll see where that goes as far as on-field ability. But there's no doubt about what he's going to bring to the team off the field.
I agree. And the fact that he is willing to say 90% when I am always 60% and I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% is good in my book. I like that honesty. I appreciate it.
Well, and I'm about 10 years older than McKenzie Milton, and I'm doing dry January right now. So I'm finding out that my body, there is no 100% apparently. I was thinking,
it is a different life.
Maybe I'm just with a little bit of alcohol, my body doesn't feel great. No, apparently my body is just not a temple, or if it was, it's just the ancient ruins of a temple.
Yeah. The lost ancient wonders of the world.
Yeah, no, it was never anywhere near that and won't ever be that way again. But yeah, no, I mean, his 90% is probably better than my 120% was at its best.
And then moving forward, we will actually be talking with, I believe, all of the Tribe 21 signees who have early enrolled, as well as all the transfers who have arrived on campus. Austin usually is manning it because my poor eyes and brain are broken at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I rely on 20 alarms to actually do the job, and they usually do not. We are going to have a triple option dropping this week. We have a long form piece from John Martin coming on the Norvell offense. We have Kevin Little dropping an X's and O's. We have our recruiting content. We have David Stout dropping a SEC to FSU piece looking at the trend that Mike Norvell has taken on. You can hear from the emotion and tone in my voice that I'm just so excited about the content that we have on Tomahawk Nation for you this week, for you always, for free.
And don't forget the basketball coverage.
And I didn't even get into any of the other sports yet. I didn't even any. Oh, that's what Austin has my job now, and that's
He was getting so excited that he went straight into the mezzo soprano crescendo and just kept going up.
That's
what
I was going to do my arpeggios, and then but I mean, seriously, we have basketball coverage. We have Austin on it. We have Brett on it. We have Matt Minnick. We have Michael Rogner, the best in the game. We have Brett on baseball coverage, which I believe we're 33 days away, according to Brett's latest countdown article, because Brett loves FSU baseball so much, he's doing a countdown of it. Like, he legitimately lives and breathes FSU baseball. National writers recognize him, and you get it for free. He subscribed to Sunday Gold. It's his podcast with him and Arya Masudi.
He does a great job, and we're very happy to feature him on Tomahawk Nation.
I cannot wait to beg for a job from him one day. Because he's just so, like, literally, guys, we have gone on for the last 5 minutes. Click on the website. You can click on the sections. We have it all organized for you. It's very nice. It's very neat. You can find all the content, scroll back, find anything. We have logs of all the archives of content. So you can see Juan and the film crew breaking down every bit of the Norvell offense and Adam Fuller defense.
Join us next week. We'll be talking more about Florida State, and hopefully we'll have some interviews with some of the new signees, and we'll hear more from us then. That's a wrap.